Hello and welcome to another open source workplace video. If this is your first time coming across the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and you'll be alerted to all upcoming videos. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Andrew Mawson. Andrew is the owner of Advanced Workplace Associates. Andrew, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, Steve. Very good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Good to see you. I'm really enjoying these conversations. We're digging deep into your workplace productivity factors around knowledge-based workers. Last time we spoke about social cohesion and we went into a great depth into what that leads to. And the topic I want to talk about today is trust.
Mm.
Trust is, we can sort of we talked about a little bit offline how a lot of that is implied and how comes it can be assumed. But as I think about trust, or you think about trust, what does trust mean?
Yeah, it's a really great question, isn't it? I mean, I think trust is a belief in general that somebody's either going to act in a way that you expect them to, um, and usually that is in relation to something that's going to be positive towards you, I think. Um, and it's a word that is often bandied around, but it often gets very confused in my experience because um, one of the little tricks I do, which I quite find quite funny, when if I'm with a group or speaking or something, I will ask the question, "Do you trust your partner?" And everybody looks at me completely mad, as if I've lost on marbles or something, and they all go, "Well, of course, oh yeah, I would." And then I go, "Well, to do what? I mean, what do you mean?" Well, if would you trust your partner to change a tire? Would you trust your partner to, I don't know, fix the plumbing or whatever? So there comes, rapidly a dimension of trust which is about competence. And I think very often trust and competence get completely mixed up. Um, because if you look at the virtual world, I mean, for many, many years, when I would talk to people about, well, don't you allow your people to work a little bit more away from the office or whatever, they would often say, well, our leaders just don't trust our people. They just, a great many of them just don't trust their and 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 I kind of got to thinking about this, and I'm thinking, well, they can't all be, these people can't all be untrustworthy. I mean, it can't be right. And so what I started to do was to say to people, okay, what I'd like you to do is just draw yourself a little Boston box, and I want you to put competence at one side, and I want you to put um, belief that they're doing, that they're working in my interest when they're out of eyeshot down the other line. And I want you to think about all the people in your team, and I want you to tell me where they are on this Boston box. Because if we've got if we've got a competence issue, if somebody's not competent enough to work away because we're worried that they won't be able to do the job, then let's know about that, and let's work on that. Because if they, if we've got people who we don't believe for whatever reason are likely to act in our interests when they're away from us, then we've got a very different issue. And we need to, and that is really a performance issue which we should be addressing in any case. If you've got both, they're both not as competent as you would want, and at the same time, you believe they won't act in your interest, then you really do have a problem. And I think actually what a lot of this question started to unveil were a lot of, well, first of all, leadership skills that weren't perhaps as honed as they should be, but also a lot of potential performance issues that people simply weren't grasping. And so our leaders won't trust our people to work away starts to become, bit of a problem. So I think, that's part of trust. But I think what the research tells us about trust is that, of course, when we're all in the office together, you could argue there are certain things we don't need to trust as much because we're seeing things, we're hearing things, we've got this always on kind of sort of flow of information, subliminal and conscious information about people. When we're working away, we have only got small snippets, and those small snippets are, we see the potential, we see the person that we're working with or whatever for that short period of time. We don't see all of the other stuff. So if things are not working quite the way we expect them to, supposing that somebody's not online when you expect them to be, and that's consistently happening, you suddenly start questioning, are these people, what are they doing? What's going on here? Is there something going on? Or if they're not delivering the performance that they usually deliver, in the new world, is this because of some problem they have, or are they not very good, or are they distracted, or are they looking for another job? I mean, so the human brain is kind of making up all sorts of, filling in the gaps, really. And so
Mm.
trust is kind of at the heart of keeping us all together. We have to believe that we're all together, that we're working together, that we're all on it. And the problem is when we're working away, we have to work a bit harder to both trust, I guess, give people the benefit of the doubt, but also individuals need to take responsibility for their trustworthiness.
Mm.
The goodness of the information they provide, the goodness of the output they provide, their ability to be where they should be, to act in a way that you'd expect them to. And I think this is what gives rise to trust. And I always have this idea in my head about a sort of almost every individual human having a trust index, and in the eyes of colleagues. And obviously you want to understand. I mean, I've no idea, for instance, in our organization, what my trust index would be. But there are people in our organization I could hazard a guess what their trust index would be, and it would be a little different. Now,
Mm.
that may be fair or unfair, but I think there's some, this is part of, I think, the growing up process. We have to, as individuals, take responsibility in a virtual world for um, for the way people view us and trust us, as well as we need to give people a little bit more freedom as leaders and give them the benefit of the doubt. So it's a really big subject, and if you get trust beginning to dilute, then relationships start to dilute, misunderstandings start to arise, people take away some of their generosity, and you start to see the decay of the strength of the organization. So
Yeah, and
it's a very long answer.
that's okay. That's okay. I find it interesting that the trust index is certainly an interesting concept. I love the Boston Matrix you come up with, but I also find it interesting whenever we start talking about trust, how quickly we get to performance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well, yeah. Well, that's I think this linkage, isn't it? That I was talking
of
about.
course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the other things you mentioned when it comes to trust and in some of your literature, the feeling of trust, that it comes from the head and the
Mm.
heart. It's kind of, well, I kind of did it reverse as I put my hand, but you know what I mean.
Yes. I
Yeah,
mean, I think
yeah,
I mean I think you and I are both both Manchester United fans and have played uh, proper football, soccer, and
yeah.
you know fine well that if there is somebody in your team that you don't think is particularly competent, they're less likely to get the ball.
Hmm.
And if they're less likely to get the ball, then their real opportunity to develop and contribute begins to be diminished. So I think these things are all kind of tied together. And I mean, I think this is where you were going with your question. I mean, what is performance? I mean, there are certain things around performance that we can measure very easily, but in the old world where we were doing things which were probably more transactional, that was a lot easier. In the new world, when we're measuring performance, it's much more difficult because oftentimes in the world of knowledge work, performance isn't really associated with a rock solid tangible outcome. It's more related to the ability for a person to contribute something and be seen as being a positive contributor. And I think in that way, performance is more difficult. But it links back to trust because people you trust, you tend to seek more from and you therefore they can contribute more value. If you don't trust them, you may be reluctant to share with them information in that they may do something with it that isn't in your interests, for instance. So yeah, it's a muddy pitch. But I think our thesis in the report, and certainly in some of the training that we're developing at the moment, is that if you're going to be able to sustain this virtualized model of working, then that has to be really enhanced, and leaders need to understand it and think about it a lot more than they do. So.
And trust is often easier to develop whenever you're with each other, right, in person, than it is
Mm.
when we're away from each other. And obviously, a lot of people have gained that trust being together and now apart. How can being apart damage some of those trusts that people should be conscious of and looking for triggers to sort of
Yeah.
correct?
Well, you see, I wouldn't necessarily agree with you, actually, Steve, on that. I think, if you take our own organization, for instance, where we've got 40 odd, associates around the world, many of whom haven't met each other physically,
Mm,
but work very effectively together. Partly because they're all very competent, but also partly because we go out of our way to create the connection with people in order that they can, learn whether they trust each other, both from a competence and a kind of hearts and minds standpoint. I mean, I think the other thing is, we're also very picky about the people we bring into our community, and trust is so big in our world. Generally speaking, you trust until you feel you can't. And we've only had a relatively small number of occasions where people have demonstrably not been trustworthy, and they're shut down instantly. There is no, there is no grayness around this. If you find that people are not operating in the way you'd want to, and you don't feel you can trust them, and they are, you know, not doing the things you would want to. If you allow that to happen, it has a potential to, how can I put it, spoil the whole thing. If some people think that their behaviour is okay, if their behaviour is kind of almost silently supported, then that doesn't work. So that's exactly how we work, because there's an awful lot of
mm,
trust involved in the way
yeah.
we operate.
Yeah, and perhaps my question was badly worded because what I was trying to establish was, relationships that are and trust that is gained in an office environment that
Yeah,
today is operating apart.
yeah.
How do people maintain and keep that going? It's just that's really where my question was going.
Well, I think probably the answer to that, Steve, is a lot about um, creating an understanding about what trust is. I mean, I
Mm,
think, and helping people to do things that maintain it. So, for instance, if for instance you've missed a deadline, or or you haven't delivered something at the quality that you'd have wanted to because you haven't had enough time, then it's important that people understand why you did, why that situation happened, and that you're not very happy about it, and that this is not the norm. I haven't stepped away from my promised behavior or promised level of quality. And I think that's one of the ways that I would
mm,
do it. I mean, I think we all from time to time, and we all want to do a great job, or certainly the people we should be hiring in our organizations should want to do a great job. But sometimes we can't, and sometimes we've got way too much on. And in a virtualized model, particularly, it's less easy to see how much work people have got. Notionally in the old world, we could at least get some sense of, as we walk by, they may be, lots of things around their desk, or that there was some, they were looking, pulling their hair out or whatever. We can't see that anymore.
mm,
And so, that's something that as a leader, you've got to work at to try and help understand more of. I mean, it's a conversation we have in our business all the time, which is, where are you on the threshold of your ability? because you can take a really, really great performer, and often really great performers are invited to do a lot more because they're great performers. And you very quickly you can find that they become utterly submerged, and then expectations that they feel bad about their work. Other people start questioning whether they were a great performer. So this balance between performance, workload, trust, perception, they're all there in the virtual world. I'm not sure whether, I hope that helped to
No,
answer
no,
your
it does, it does, it does, and I appreciate, because in essence where I was going was then how do you then manage it in the virtual world, which is what you did then go on to answer. So look, thank you, Andrew. You've provided a few insights and a few thoughts for us today. So I really appreciate you giving your time and sharing your thoughts with Open Source Workplace today. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Steve. Thanks. Have a good week.